All right, and welcome, Amanda, to the Love Your Life show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Susie. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited because you have so much information. I have like all these stickies in my book, and the information that you have is information that I want the listeners to get to. I will include in the show notes. I listened to your podcast episode where you described your whole backstory, and it was like fascinating and impactful, and a lot of it resonated with me. And so I want the listeners to go click on that link and give that show a listen. Today, I want to jump right in and highlight two main parts of your journey because I see them coming up for women and probably listeners thinking these thoughts and having similar experiences. So one is the thought that I'm too young for this to be menopause, and the other is like, oh, this symptom isn't menopause related because it's not, the normal symptoms that we think of with menopause. Does that ever?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And so we know that there's this massive knowledge gap, right? Essentially, there's many of us go through this and we just don't know enough or know anything at all. I was in the I don't know anything at all camp for sure. But neither did my doctors. The
Yeah.
knowledge gap extends all over the place. And so the am I too young for menopause was something that I asked myself because when I was 42, I started having severe symptoms. I think I'd already had some symptoms leading up to it, but was a little bit dismissive of them, but had severe symptoms from the age of 42 and then spent 2 years in the healthcare system in Canada, which is had at the time had a really good healthcare. People desperate to help me but didn't know how to help me until a gynecologist that I went to see about something else said, "Oh no, this is perimenopause," and I'm like, "What?" And he went, "Yeah, this is perimenopause,
Harry,
and
what? Right.
these are not symptoms are normal." And I actually said, "What's perimenopause?" I'd never heard of the word before,
Mm.
and then I sort of was like, "I'm too young to be going through this because don't you have to be older in your 50s?" And so it frustrated me. I was relieved and then frustrated that I didn't know something, especially being in the health and wellness industry, right? But it sort of sent me down the rabbit hole, I suppose. And we know that our reproductive hormones, estrogen and progesterone, start to decline in our late 30s.
Mhm.
And they can last 8 to 10 years. The average is about 7 or 8 years, right? So that we've got this long period of time where our hormones fall and they fall in progesterone in a slide manner and estrogen in like a roller coaster, like a fluctuating manner. And so women may or may not have any symptoms, but the majority, like 75% of women, will experience up to 7 symptoms of menopause, of which there's about 34 recognized. Honestly, if we really sat
Mm.
down and had a cup of tea, we'd get 50. There's so many symptoms, right? And we don't always associate them with menopause. And I think that the confusion happens, Susie, where we in our terminology. So menopause is a line in the sand. It's a
Mhm.
timestamp that says it's been 12 months since your last menstrual cycle, therefore you're in menopause. Nothing exciting happens. There's no like brass band
Right.
playing or anything. And so anything prior to that is perimenopause, and anything post that is postmenopause. So this menopause, am I too young for menopause? Well, the average age for a white woman is 51. It's a bit lower and a bit higher for other, ethnic and cultural groups. But if we say like 50, 51 is our average age, and there's an 8 to 10 year window leading up to that,
Mm.
then in your 40s, you're more than likely going to be going through perimenopause. Right.
Mm.
And so when we go to our doctors presenting with symptoms that make no sense, that
Mm.
don't feel hormonal, that don't feel like cramps or mood swings or, the typical hot flashes that women talk about, hot
Mhm.
flushes, depending on which side of the pond you're on. Well, the doctors, chances are they're just going to say, well, maybe you've got depression, here's some antidepressants.
Mhm.
Maybe you have anxiety, there's some anti-anxiety medication. And so filling that knowledge gap is super important, both in the medical community and for women themselves.
I mean, that's why I just really encourage listeners to get your book because you do, I didn't count, but you do go through here of, maybe it's more than 34 symptoms of menopause because exactly what you're saying, that it's so interesting of all the different things. Like I was having dry eye and one of the doctors here in Australia, I don't think this would have happened in America, was, he was like a 30-year-old man and he's like, are you still cycling regularly? Like he addressed the menopause, and I was like, oh, I love you. Like
Yeah,
I
that's
don't think dry
amazing.
eye.
Oh, dry eyes are terrible. Dry eyes and ringing in the ears and tinnitus and bleeding gums, extra saliva. Like these are really odd symptoms. And there's
Mm-hmm.
no way in a million years you would have any of those symptoms and think, oh, this is menopause. But we know that estrogen receptors are almost in um every mechanism in our body.
Mm,
They impact every system. So the estrogen receptors go through our brain and our optical nerve and in our mouth and in our skin and heart and everywhere.
mm,
So as soon as we start to lose like our estrogen in this fluctuating manner, then it can present itself differently to everyone. So while it's a shared experience, because all women will go through menopause if they live long enough, the symptom side of it makes it very unique, and every woman has to be treated individually because of that, right?
yeah. So I guess like a listener might be wondering, like, why are Susie and Amanda harping on like to know that your symptoms are menopause related or hormonal related? Like, why would it matter if their dry eyes have to do with menopause or if their the stomach issues they're having have to do with menopause?
Yes, a really great question. So who cares basically if it's
Right.
and again that comes down to this individual person. So if we look at this statistically, so we have, well, in the world by in 2 years' time, there's going to be 1 billion women in menopause, right? And so
Mm,
every one of them is going to experience it differently. Some people in some parts of the world where menopause is really embraced tend to have less symptoms. In
mm,
the Western world, we tend to have worse symptoms, maybe extra stresses, etc. But if we look statistically and say that of the women that are going through menopause, 75% will have an average of 7 symptoms, and then 25% of those will have symptoms that impact their quality of life detrimentally and severely as well. Women leave work. 1 in 10 women leave work, and so we and marriages break down, and we see all of these things happening. So if you're in that 75% where you've got symptoms and they're just annoying and they don't bother you that much, well then that's fine. Who cares whether you're dry eyes from hormones or just from hay fever or whatever? Treat the symptom, it's fine. But it's what happens through perimenopause typically is symptoms don't stay static. They change. And so your dry eye might start at the beginning, but then you might start having hot flashes or incontinence, or you might start having joint pain. And so it's an evolving type of process. And for those women that are severe with their symptoms, or for those that are just really struggling to just function properly, then the reason it's good to know is because you can get treatment options. And
mm-hmm,
we should always be aware that they exist because there's so many different treatment options women can get, and we want to make sure they get the right care.
mm-hmm.
And I'll use myself as an example. One of my first symptoms was migraine with aura, and I didn't know that's what it was. And I had 2 years of struggling with numbness in my face and falling over, and oh, it was horrible, nausea all the time,
Awful.
with no headache. And that's why the doctors didn't realize it was a migraine with aura, because I didn't actually have the headache, but I would lose vision, I would lose my grip in my hand. I actually couldn't grip things. I thought I was having a stroke. And then I got depression as well, and it was severe, really severe. Like I was rocking on the bed severe, not wanting to carry on. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I went to the doctor and he offered me hormone therapy, at the time I was uneducated. Obviously, I didn't know anything what was going on. And I just said, I don't want to take hormones. Why would I want to do that? And he said, well, I can offer you an antidepressant. It's still indicated for menopause. And I took this antidepressant and it helped my migraines and it helped my depression. Then I got started to get the genital urinary symptoms of
Mm,
menopause, and I started to get some joint pain. And the antidepressants couldn't help me with that, right? And
right.
so and so like it's just good to know, because the reason it's practical is because when you know, you have informed choice.
Hmm.
You can talk to your doctor in a valid conversation, and you know what the symptoms are, you know what the time span is of potentially these symptoms, you know how you feel, and you can have a valid conversation rather than just being dismissed or incorrectly prescribed something.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And the listeners of this show are really action takers, and also, I'm encouraging them to be advocates for themselves and their health. And my background, I have a similar background to you, that I started as like, in the exercise and personal training and all that. So it is this in recognizing sort of the wellness of it all. And I'm on hormone replacement also, just for this. And like, yes, I could get eye drops for my eyes, and I can get special sheets for my hot flashes, but it's almost like whack-a-mole, like what's coming next
So I
versus,
think that's what I say in the book. I think it's like
oh
playing
yeah,
whack-a-mole or
yeah,
bingo, menopause bingo. You'll get all the symptoms probably.
right. Yeah, exactly. And like, what are they and where are they? So I really appreciate that you bring that up. And I also like the idea of it being protective for myself moving forward, and what studies have shown sort of protecting our brain and our heart.
Yeah, and the consensus though from the medical community is that hormone therapy is not prescribed for preventative measures, but there
Mhm.
are some studies to show that they may be preventative for the heart, the bones, etc. And the Alzheimer's type study was specifically for those women with the APO4 gene, and even then it was not conclusive, and so we don't know. But the fact is that it is a safe treatment for women, and it should be considered. What I might add on to that, though, is I think it's really important to talk about this, that it's not a panacea at all, and it shouldn't be
Mhm.
considered that way. And sometimes I hear the narrative being a little bit like I'm either pro HRT or against it. Well,
Mhm.
actually, the magic happens in the middle. It's like, Susie, you went to the doctor and it was a good fit for you. And so therefore, you
Mhm.
chose to go on it and it served you well. There are some women that will never be able to go on it. If they
Mhm.
have a contraindication from, say, breast cancer or other cancers, then they don't have that option. But there are other options available to them that are non-hormonal, and some new drugs that are coming out for that too. And then
Mhm.
there's people like me that I found out sort of later on, as I was trying hormone therapy for about 5 years, that I just couldn't take it. I had a hormone sensitivity, and every time I tried a new preparation, it made my symptoms good for a minute, and then so
Mhm.
much worse that it was just not worth taking it. And so I think just acknowledging that everybody's journey is separate, and just to jump on the protective factor, I love that we're talking about this in the health
Mhm.
space. Like, we've gone from you and I being like the coaches and the personal trainers of old, where yeah, we wanted to look strong and feel good and maybe look good because we all have that aesthetic sort of side to it. I don't care whether you believe it or not, we do, because it's been
Mhm.
studied. But then when things like this happen, when life changes happen or life shifts happens, you're like, you know what, I'm going to probably spend more of my adult life menopausal. Right. If you
Mhm.
think about it, starting in our early 40s and we don't die till we're 80
Yeah.
more, then we spend most of our lives in this menopausal type state. We want it to be healthy, we want it to
Mhm.
be good quality, and we want to live for a long time and enjoy it, right? So what
Mhm.
are the preventative things we can do, like not just to get us through the struggle of the menopausal side, but then to like live long and healthy? And so that's why, like, let's just push the exercise as much as possible, because it's literally the gold standard for everything. It helps disease prevention, it helps weight
Mhm.
management, it helps depression, anxiety, and so I try to come at this whole conversation in a very balanced way, because I don't want any woman ever to feel left out. Hormone
Mhm.
therapy is valid for a lot of women. It's just not an option for others. And so
Right.
therefore we have to talk about the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do appreciate. I think I guess it's my personal opinion that I feel like hormone therapy is getting more of that. Like, everyone get on hormones because of all the negativity of the what was it, 2002 study, where they said like hormones are bad, and everyone got off of hormones, and we're just trying to sort of debunk that
We're trying
negative.
to we're trying to address the balance, right? And it's like a pendulum swing, and then it'll come back to the center a little bit, right? But I mean, no woman should feel like she's missing out if she can't take it, but no woman should suffer. through
Right.
menopause
And I
either.
like, again, a little plug for your book. I really like in your book that is a very strong message throughout the way you sort of talk about moving through menopause and like a flexible experiment almost. Like okay, so maybe try the hormone therapy or try like you speak about alcohol and sugar in there. And I guess I want to get to the alcohol and sugar part, but the one thing I do want to highlight from what you just said is this sort of overall wellness. Like when, if we're living from until age 100 or 102, whatever it is, like how do we want to be living? And so looking at the things that listeners of this show are going to hear in a lot of the episodes, like our sleep and our movement and our what we're eating, stress is a big one. So could you speak a little bit about how the importance of looking at our lifestyle choices?
Yeah, it's so great. So I think I wrote the book based on like 4 tenets, although because I combined two, but there are essentially 5 tenets of health that we fitness and life coaches talk about: the nutrition, fitness, stress, and sleep. They're the two I sort of combined along with our mindset. And then that's your bag of goodies, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
you're a life coach and you met your partner on a meditation app, which I absolutely love that story. But it's the idea that we can't just do all of these things and not fix what's going on in our mind. And actually, for me, that was the biggest game changer for me. I'm a
Mm.
very fast person. I don't stop. I keep going, 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 and I burn out. I went through a burnout, and I went through a burnout because I couldn't set boundaries. I couldn't appreciate everything in the moment, and I had to work really, really hard on that. It was the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And it was rewarding because it allowed me to create very strict boundaries in my
Mm.
personal life and in my work capacity. For example, I'm working on a startup company and I'm like, I won't work past, like, actually, I'm bending the rules a little bit for you because I
Thank
won't
you.
work,
Other
yeah,
side
because
of the
you're
world,
on
right?
the other side of the world, but I won't work. I want to stop at 5 o'clock and I want to cook dinner. I love cooking dinner. Like it's something I like
Mm.
to do for my family. And then I want to sit down on the sofa with my husband and watch telly and then evening. Like,
Mm.
and I don't want to be taking work phone calls and all of those things. And so I don't want to be saying yes to everything all the time. And so as far as like that side, I know you've got all of that covered in your work. But then when we come to the other things that we know actually make people healthy, it's
Mm.
not just the food we eat, it's not just the exercise, it's not just having a good quality sleep, and it's not just managing stress, it's all of it together. And so, how do you make change when there's all of these elements and you just don't know where to start? And that's like
Mhm.
where the stuff I love talking about. So, I'm a huge um, advocate for behavioral change. I've done a lot
Mm.
of work with it, and in my experience as a coach, and just getting people to just say, you don't have to overhaul your whole diet. How about we just do one thing and we practice that and we practice that for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, and just see if you can start to heal your relationship with food. How
Mm.
about we just start moving a little bit more? You're probably not moving enough. Most of us don't, right? And we don't do enough unintentional exercise. Even if we work out most days, we then sit in a chair for the rest of it.
Mm.
We need to be moving a little bit more. How can we introduce that in a small, meaningful way that has these long lasting results? And
Mm.
so that's always my approach to any of the tenets of health. Pick something that you think you can do. Pick something you think you can be successful at because you need some wins to get going. There's no point
Yeah.
saying, that's it. I'm never going to eat sugar again because
Yeah.
you mentioned sugar. And then all of a sudden on day 3, you're like, all I want to do is eat a big bag of M&Ms because I've completely deprived myself. What a
Yeah.
stupid thing to suggest, right? So it's like do things that are practical, that fit in with your life, but actually make sense towards the goals that you're trying to achieve.
I really appreciate that. It also, in your sense of humor comes out in your book too, where you were
Oh my
talking
God, yeah.
about alcohol and don't keep you away from a good pint. But that idea of just start small and see again like how it makes you feel and what is the point for this long-term wonderful life we're going to be living. Does alcohol, how do you feel the next day? How do you feel the next day after you eat sugar? Or how do you feel the next day after you take work calls at 8 p.m.? Tapping
Yeah.
into
find a way to make it like fit into your life. And so if we're talking about sugar, I mean, sugar is one of those really silly conversations, and people say just quit sugar. And I'm like, well, sugar ends up in the body as glucose. That's its final breakdown state. And every carbohydrate contains glucose, every carbohydrate. And so even down to the broccoli that you eat. I mean, if we're going to be really picky about it, it's really a silly thing to say, I'm going to quit sugar. I think what most people mean by that is they're going to quit added sugar, or they're going to quit like starchy foods,
Candy or
possibly
right. Yeah.
like the ultra processed. So be specific. If you're going to quit it, like I would say to people listening, is it the chocolate that you're eating every night? Just say, I'm just going to cut down on that. I'm going to, and then I
Mhm.
would never ever cut down on anything completely, because we know when you start doing the restriction model, it just circles back and it ends up being binge eating, and it never helps
Yeah.
anyone. Most people, I would say,
All
not
or
everyone.
nothing. Yeah.
And so the all or nothing, I'm like all or something. So for example, if your problem is candy bars or bags of crisps or chips, maybe you just say, you know what, I'm just going to have them once a week. I'm going to plan for them. I'm going to have them on a Friday night, and
Mhm.
that's going to be the only time I have them. And then set yourself up for success. Don't buy them until the day, and then like
Mhm.
plan around it, because when you plan, chances are you're going to stick to it. Now, I'm the same with alcohol, because I was never a big drinker, but I couldn't drink through perimenopause. And lots of women really struggle, and they find that it makes their symptoms worse. They don't recover. It impacts their sleep. We know it impacts sleep. It wants
Mhm.
to get out of your body quickly. So it always happens at 8 minutes past 3. Everyone wakes up and goes, oh my God, I can't get back to sleep. And
That
and
glass of
um
wine.
it's like, I know. And so for me, it was my migraines. It triggered my migraines
Mm.
terribly. And it wasn't worth it. So I actually went completely alcohol free, like cold turkey, because it wasn't just a choice. It was like I was not well. And
Yeah, you
so
want
it was
to.
it was easy. It was the downside was too big. Um, and I'm at the other side of menopause now. Like I'm 4 years out of it. I don't have symptoms, and everything's calmed down. And I do enjoy a glass of like a gin and tonic occasionally.
Mm.
But I'm very wary of having too much alcohol, just because of the health risks
Yeah.
involved with drinking. I know they've reviewed all of the units that people should drink now, and it's been reduced considerably. But I probably would have maybe one or two a week tops,
Mhm.
sometimes none. And I just use it usually for social, or maybe it's like date night with my husband on a Friday night. We might go out for a cocktail and a bite to eat, and I just use it in those ways. And I think that if you can do it and make it fit your lifestyle,
Mhm.
then you don't have to give things up. It's just, where does it, what do you ultimately want? Well, I ultimately don't want to feel like crap the next
Right.
day. And I don't like feeling tipsy anymore. Oh my God, Susie, I don't like feeling tipsy anymore. Do you remember when we were younger and you'd go out and you'd start getting tipsy and it'd feel
Yeah.
really, really good? I drink it now and I'm like, oh my God, the world's spin. I just don't like it anymore. I've become a
Yeah.
bit, yeah. Do you feel the same?
Well, I haven't been drinking alcohol for a while, and I take it the same way that you do. Is I sort of take it a day at a time. I did not have a drinking problem, but I really found how it was metabolizing quicker in my body, and it was like I was having the beer and then feeling hungover. Like it wasn't waiting until 3 a.m. It was like 30 minutes later. I was getting
Yeah.
and just all of it. It was I didn't like. I was more aware in my new relationship of how it just made me more like the depressant factor of alcohol came up where it just, like I would find fault in my husband for saying like the sky is blue. And I was like, why am I adding this substance to my life that's making my life
Yeah.
harder to live? So I just sort of was like, okay, I'm just going to stop and see how that goes. But I like your idea of like not making this finite all or nothing, like I'm never going to drink it again, or I'm never going to have a donut again, or I'm never going to or I'm never going to have chocolate after dinner again. It's a like, okay, well, maybe we can cut back a little, the small, specific
Yeah.
steps, because it does affect us.
It does, yeah. And one of the things I really like to talk about, and I'm pretty sure this is something that you coach people, is like the mindful approach to eating rather than the mindless approach.
Right.
And for those people that eat without thinking about it and always go for a cake or some biscuits at 2 o'clock with their cup of tea or whatever, like it tends to be habit. It tends to be like, oh, I usually have a cup of tea right now, so I'll get some digestive biscuits or
Yeah.
whatever. And all of these things add up. And if like weight is one of the things that's an issue for you, it's really good to be mindful around what you're eating. And so this is just a judgment call you make. And so but one of the things is like when it's time to eat, just stop and pause and go, do I want this? Do I really want this now? Am I hungry or am I just bored? Right. And it's
Yeah.
just a question you can ask yourself. Like when you go to have the drink, like, do I really want this drink now? Do I really want to deal with the aftermath of this? If you're prepared to go ahead with it, then do it. But just taking that pause and having a second to think about it has been shown to help really
Oh, for
heal like
sure.
relationships with food and make better decisions. And it just makes you mindful. You've made a decision and you haven't just done it without thinking, right? Super
Yeah,
easy
what
to do.
I really appreciate, like there's sort of that pause, like the power of the pause between the feeling of the urge and the acting out of the urge. I also have been enjoying asking myself, and my clients have been finding success asking themselves, like, does this feel like love? Like what I'm about to eat, like pausing and being like, like there's a part of like right in that moment, that very like child brain is like, I want this. And it's like, but does this feel like love to me? Like eating this donut. Okay, maybe it does. Like right now, this feels soothing and wonderful, and that's great. But sometimes when we pause, we're like, no, it doesn't, because I've been, this is not something like I would rather button my pants tomorrow. That feels more loving. Or, am I putting this in my butt? It's just being more mindful about all of it.
Yeah.
And in midlife, that's what I've been liking more of, getting attention away from sort of that external focus, like, oh, but if you have a donut, then it'll look this way, but more like, no, what does it feel like in my
Feel
body
like
15 minutes after that sugar hits my bloodstream? Does that feel like love? Is this in my best interest? Is this like in my Susie wise woman way?
ah,
That's what I like, sort of pulling in that
and
piece.
you get to make the rules as well. And that's another thing I think
Yeah.
that midlife does for us is that there are all these people telling us what to do, and it's really annoying, right? And a lot of the time women are so vulnerable that they can't tell what's nonsense and what's real fact, right? And I think that you've got to, this is going back to the being your own true detective, right? What's
Yeah.
really working for you? You might go completely vegan because and you might feel wonderful on it, but that doesn't mean to say that I'm going to, right? And
Right.
so it's one of those things, like just try and work out what is best for you, right? And I cannot go without missing a meal. I
Mm,
just can't.
right.
I couldn't, I've tried intermittent fasting and I felt like a dirty dish rag. It was horrible. I exercise, I need fuel. I know what type of fuel I need, right? I
Mm,
know that I need to eat protein throughout the day. I know that
mhm.
around my workout that I like to have like some carbohydrate, whether some bread or banana or something that's going to get into my system quickly. And we're all different, right? And so I just think that you get to make those decisions yourself, but we can give you guidance to get there, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I feel like that is sort of our almost like our heroine's path in life. Like we sort of go through beginning age of like looking externally, what's right, and they're telling me what's right, and being that good girl and doing the right thing. And now getting into this area where it's like, keep your eye on your own friggin' lane. Like, so what if she's vegan? If you feel dizzy and fall like that, or so what that she's able to, like that she's not drinking at all, or that she's able to drink every night, or that it's like what works for you, and
Yeah.
becoming more of a, stepping into our authority is what I see it. I find it interesting with myself where like, because I still can get swayed and I'm like, oh, well, she's doing that intermittent fasting thing. I'm like, right, but that doesn't work for you, Susie. And
Yeah.
it's being aware of maybe where we're feeling pressure and maybe getting off those feeds on social media or stop.
Yes.
And also what I really find interesting is when we're looking, like we have an idea, so maybe I do get more cranky when I'm drinking with my husband. Like my inclination from being that good little girl training is to be like, well, I need to Google then to see if alcohol does, like, if am I right? And I really find some of that power in midlife and stepping into that wise woman is that like yeah, do it your way. You're like, try it, go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Yeah.
Well, and that needs to be coupled though with the knowledge in your book, because like we need to know about ourselves. We have to have a body of knowledge that works for us, so that I guess part of the thing with menopause that was so confusing for me, and exasperating, led me to feel hopeless and helpless at times, is going into doctors and there being that total lack of knowledge, and there and me being there like, but I'm having these issues, and then being like, well, you just need to get on the pill, I guess, or you need to get an antidepressant, or no, nothing's wrong, we don't, your lab results turned up nothing, like you're good, or like that. And so I do really think this is the time for women. You just said 1 billion women will be in that postmenopause period, for women to take it upon ourselves to learn it as much as the more we learn about ourselves, it's my opinion, the better. I mean, that's sort of what we're here to learn, how, Susie and Amanda show up in this life, and how do we best live our lives.
Like the idea, idea of giving the women the power to advocate for themselves, to create agency. We both want that, right? And so, like, the idea is like, I don't want any woman ever to go to the doctor and be dismissed, whether the doctor is gaslighting that woman or whether the doctor just has a knowledge gap, right? It doesn't matter. We don't want them to go into that situation like that. And so, like, that's why I wrote the book. It's like your best mate's guide to menopause. Like, read it, understand it, right?
You put questions in there, what to ask your doctor. I love it.
To ask your doctor. Yeah. But it's not just that. Like, it's like, go to the Australasian Menopause Society is one of the best websites in the world. They have how to talk to your doctor. They have resources guides. They have what prescriptions you can ask for. Print them all off. Highlight that shit. That's what I did. I went to one of my doctors. I lived in Texas. And this was when I wanted to start trying hormone therapy, when the antidepressant stopped working. I'd read, I was fine. I really thought it would be a good fit for me. And he refused and said, oh, well, no, it'll give you breast cancer. And I went, well, no, we know that's not the case now. And he wasn't happy that I said that. Yeah. And then I said, this is from the North American Menopause Society. This is their position statement. And they say that this is first-line treatment. I'd like to try it. And he went, fine, okay, I'll give you Premarin, which is an old type of hormone therapy, which is an oral tablet. And it's not some of the more safer applications, which is through the skin, like transdermal. And I just said, really? That's the one you want to give me? And he went, well, yeah, that's the only one I'm prepared to prescribe. And I went, fine, I'll have it. What progesterone are you going to give me to go with it?
Yeah.
And he went, why do you want a progesterone? And I went, because I have a uterus. And so for those women who don't know, when you have a uterus with estrogen, you have to have progesterone to protect the lining so that you don't get uterine cancer. Because estrogen is anabolic, it will grow the lining. And if you're not having your natural cycle as well, you're not always going to shed that lining. And so he dismissed me. And in the end, I just said, give me a referral. I want a referral to OBGYN. Yeah. I'm a feisty little madam, though, so I don't mind doing that. But when I got home that night, there was an email from him that said, I'm very sorry. I literally didn't know. I went home and I read up on it, and I put you a new prescription in to the pharmacy, and I will treat other women differently now. And I just was really happy about that, because and that's it's that idea that you can impact one person, can impact many. Can impact many. So for all of the women listening that are really struggling, be prepared, like a good girl guide, be prepared, dib, and then, print off the guidelines off the menopause website. Take my book in, there's tons of books out there now, and then go in and be prepared, as in monitor your symptoms, like over a three-month period. Every day, just write down what your symptoms were, and then summarize them on one page, and just go, I've had 20 hot flashes a day for 3 months. I have had 5 depressive episodes. These are all menopausal symptoms. I want to be treated for that. And so it shouldn't be that way, but we have to fight for it. It's ridiculous.
Well, and I'm telling you, the listeners of the show are action takers. And like when we do that, like what you did with the Texas doctor, I mean, it sounds like you were comfortable there. I sort of said like, because I know my nervous system would have been like, oh my gosh, he's saying I shouldn't have progesterone, even though in my brain, I know I should, but you stepping forward, you changed it. And then stepping forward will change it for their daughters, for the next generation. It is changing. And I think the more people out there saying something.
We're not in the same place I was 10 years ago. At 42, 10 years ago, I was lost and nobody could help me. And it's not like that now, but change is slow, but it's happening. And I think we're the generation to do it. I think we're the generation that are just sick have been pushed around, and we want change to happen. And so it's sort of like a global movement. I quite like it. Like it's been pretty amazing to see. And I never thought I'd be in this space where I'm sat talking about menopause in a million
Yeah.
years, but here I am. Here I
Yeah,
am.
I love it. I think that's a great place to end the show because it is that sort of that inspiration motivating, like fire lit under your butt. Like, let's go get it, warriors. Like, learn your track. I just want to highlight a couple things you said that are very important. Track your symptoms, like track them, the headache, the random itchy skin, the like, just have an easy way to write them down. You know, there are many apps out there now that also help and sort of make it fun. I have one that's like gamifies it. You're like 47-day streak. I'm like, yay me, you know, but like write down your symptoms, be your best advocate. And then yes, we will change this. I had a person on the show maybe 2 summers ago who she wrote a book called Perimenopause. And that term itself, like when I typed it into Google and whatever, Google kept spell checking and changing it. And now that no longer happens. So I'm like, it is happening. We are this new wave, like step up, speak up, advocate for yourself, and let's move into this period where women
advocate for yourself because it will help others. And I always say to the women in my community, even though you don't feel like you're making a difference, you are. You don't have to have a massive platform to be the person that's heard. One person is all it takes to help another person.
Yes, it's lovely. Awesome. Thank you, Amanda, for coming. And I will put links to, well, certainly, I hope everyone has your book in their Amazon cart or they're going to go to their small bookstore and get it right after listening to this show. Where's the best place to connect with you and to send you some love?
Well, if you go to my website, which is just amandathebe.com, like all roads lead to everything. I'm probably most active on Instagram, but you can find it from that website.
Yeah. Thank you. I do need to shout out I love your Instagram, and we didn't even touch on it in this, but it's in the book, but all the helpful knowledge you have behind strength training. And I sometimes save your things and then bring them to the gym with me. And I'm like,
oh, great. I haven't done any for a while. I've been a little bit busy, but in the book, there's a 12-week strength training program, which I wanted to give every woman a little introduction to it. So that's super helpful for people.
So helpful. All right. Thank you, Amanda, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Susie. Take care.